I'm Anita OBrien from the Cartoon Museum. My question is for the panel as a whole. In view of the referendum, just in relation to the Erasmus Plus funding pots, do you have any sense whether that is something which might continue in the event that there is a Brexit?
So part of an answer might be that Erasmus is not the same as European. If you look in the details, that they'll talk about Erasmus participating countries, which is countries as well as European countries. So it may be that it might stay, but I'm not going to say that.
Hello, I'm Clare, University Curator at the University of Birmingham. My question really is in reference to university museums. So it's a question for Paul and also comments on some of the things that Maria talked about in her keynote. And I wanted to ask how much of your international agenda is driven by the university's strategic approaches to international relations, and how much do the universities respond to the museums and galleries agenda in terms of a desire for public engagement and the kind of social ambitions that Maria was describing?
That's a very interesting question. So there are three principal strands of the Oxford strategic plan, and that's similar to nearly every other Russell Group strategic plan, which is research, teaching, and wider engagement, it's called in the Oxford context. So, and it's not much more directive than that. So we have a very open playing field in which to deliver the activity. So within the overall context, we as museums more or less steer ourselves. And in terms of the direct influences, it's partly our responsibility as a major partner museum that drives what we do in terms of the leadership agenda. And it's partly, I think, a recognition of the way that our sector is going. The intro said better together, and I think that is true, actually. So the four university museums in Oxford are now working much more in partnership than they used to be. I'm working much more in partnership internationally than they used to be. And I think that's as much a general desire to work internationally as it's dictated by university strategy.
Lucy Marder, who's the Cultural Partnerships Officer of the South East Museum Development Programme. My not a question, it's a comment. Partnerships have come through so strongly both today and on Wednesday around health and well-being. And I just wanted to make a comment on this project and the extent to which partnership behaviours have been exemplified for those of us in the museum development community, supporting many regional museums, many of them small, to engage with this agenda, and the willingness of the work project to help museum development to build capacity and enable us to support even very small organisations to begin to take this first step. And that, to me, is something that the interpersonal behaviours of partnership that is so fundamental, seeing that working through a structure at so many levels, is something that's really refreshing, and museum development doesn't get from every national project, and it's really been moving things forward for us, and I just wanted to make that comment today. So thank you.
Would any of the panel like to comment on Lucy's remarks?
Maybe just say thank you, first of all, but also that what I found through the research for the Working Internationally Regional project is that international work isn't confined to large national museums, or, for example, we've talked about university museums who maybe have good international connections already, but there's a real variety of museums wanting to work internationally for all different reasons. It's not always about generating income. It can be about a lot about learning, and I know, for example, in Hampshire there's been a lot of peer network taking place, and that it's been very encouraging to see that small museums haven't been put off by the idea, and something we've been trying to encourage that maybe there's more scope for is partnerships in the UK between larger and smaller museums to develop the capacity to work internationally when resources and things are so limited at the moment.
Yeah, I agree very much with that. These things are as much about skills development for our staff as they are about the international engagement. And many of our initiatives, I would do simply for the benefits in terms of skill development and staff development.
I just want to make a point as well that in terms of British Council perspective, we're very much wanting to work with smaller museums as well. And I know that it seemed from the presentation that because of the strategic aims of UK-India 2017, that we are going to be working with big museums, high-profile projects, large reach. That doesn't take smaller museums out of the equation. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
Marjorie Althorpe-Guyton. I'm actually not in the museum sector now, but I used to be. I'm Secretary General of ICA International, which is a body of art critics working across the world. My question is really to Dana. Do you think the case is being made to trusts and foundations to support grants to professionals, young professionals in particular, in the sector? I undertook a report for the Gulbenkian Foundation on interchange between the UK and Portugal, building on that historic relationship. It was a brilliant programme, but then they closed the programme, which, because of the shift to social and educational priorities, is the case being made to trusts and foundations to return or to look again at their museum and educational funding? Thank you.
I'm not quite sure in terms of trusts and foundations specifically, but certainly we were inundated with applications for the travel grants under the Working International Regional Project. I think it was one of the first times we've seen a scheme that was completely open. It wasn't restricted to a particular type of activity. It wasn't restricted to a particular part of the world. Due to funding, we might only run that once, but we're hoping through this that we can really demonstrate the need for this, why it's so important, what the impact is. And that's certainly something as we've kind of developed the scheme, and we've tried to make it really light touch, but we are expecting quite a lot in terms of reporting back and being able to share that. And then it will be available publicly for people to use to make a case to organisations. For example, I think I saw something recently, I think it's the British Association of Friends of Museums, who are running a travel grant scheme that is also allows international travel as part of that. And so it seems there's things out there, but I think there's a lot of work to be done to make that case still. For very small amounts of money can make a big difference.
Yeah, agree. And one last question here, thank you.
Ken Arnold from Welcome. There's a specific question for Paul, but I suspect there's a more general version that maybe other people would reflect on. And the question is about whether there are secondary benefits that you've spotted from these international collaborations that might, I was going to say heal, but maybe that's too strong a word, but might build other bridges, which is within the divide, if you like, between the museums and the university itself. So are there ways in which the museums working internationally, has that provided instances where the museum has reached out within the university context? And I suppose I'm thinking in general terms about where reaching far away can end up providing opportunities to make local connections that have sort of been missed.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a divide between university museums and their host universities. I think until recently there's perhaps been an underutilisation of the potential of university museums, and universities have woken up to that they want to engage broader publics with the research that's been done in the institution and to get them engaged with the teaching activity of the institution. And they wondered how to contact those audiences, and all of a sudden they realised that actually they have institutions that have in some cases existed for a century or more that are actually set up to do exactly that. And so in places like University College London, in Birmingham, Manchester, Oxford, many other universities, that potential has been woken up to. And then there is the power for the museums, because of their natural instinct to operate internationally, because they're parts of international universities, to work with potential funding bodies in other countries. So, for example, we have collecting expeditions funded by the South Korean Polar Institute, that is a source of funding that would be simply inaccessible without that networking that's provided by the museum. So there is potential, but it's very dynamic, and it's hard, I think, to come up with a single catch-all recommendation of how it works, because I think the institutional landscape will differ in each case, and the subtleties will vary.
And I think for us as well, something to take away with you is, if you're wanting to partner with universities as well and look at that relationship, is to manage that relationship and think about what it is that you want to gain from partnering with universities. Because I think in the early days, there was we were unsure. I think, Bruce, you were unsure whether we wanted the universities just to validate what we were doing, and that isn't a true partnership. And you need to think about what the universities are going to add, because just putting their name on your funding bid or the report that you write just as validation for what you do is not really very, very strong. Would you agree, Bruce?
It's a good point.